Welcome to the Outdoor Biz Podcast, your home for inspiring conversations with outdoor insiders. Each week, author, speaker, adventurer, and outdoor industry veteran Rick Saez talks in depth with iconic brand founders, sales and marketing pros, product designers, and industry rising stars. Listen in when Rick's guests offer actionable advice to land your ideal industry gig and grow your outdoor career. Catch us again when the conversation shifts to the hottest outdoor products, destinations, and the latest industry insights. And now, here's Rick.
Welcome to episode 263 of the Outdoor Biz Podcast. We're talking about saving wild places through photography with acclaimed photographer Robert Glenn Ketchum, brought to you this month by SmugMug. Robert Glenn Ketchum is a pioneer and conservation photographer recognized by Audubon magazine as one of the 100 people who shaped the environmental movement in the 20th century. He tells us the stories of his photos and influential work from Mexico to Alaska and more. Welcome to the show, Robert.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, it's great to catch up with another photographer and another adventurer. I look forward to rambling through our questions with you. Let's start with how you were introduced to the outdoors and adventure. How'd that come about?
When I was very young, my dad was a hunter and a fisherman and spent a portion of his real-time life leaving his office and going with his friends to shoot pheasants in Nebraska or something. And he didn't take me hunting, but he did take me fishing.
Oh.
And we did some stream fishing, and I grew to love that process and started to really like being out of doors with my dad.
Cool. Where'd you guys go? Did you grow up in California? Sorry.
Yeah, I did. And
okay.
We fished in places that were like trout farms, like whitewater. And then we also fished things like the Merced River in Yosemite,
cool,
which it was legal at the time.
Right.
And then when he, many years later, started overwintering in Sun Valley, we fished Silver Creek and some of the really top streams in North America, because he'd made friends with all of those ranchers that owned the access to those streams.
Wow, that'd be fantastic. Did you by any chance fish Jess Ranch? It was a put and take place up in the high desert above the San Bernardino Mountains.
No, I did not.
Okay, yeah. I grew up down there. It was first place I fished. It was interesting. So you got to fish some great streams. Holy cow, what a great place to grow up fishing, man.
My dad was plugged into the sort of the Hemingway ideology. Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah. And he followed that, and I got to be the beneficiary of it from when I was about 5 to when I was about 15. So.
That's a good thing to grow up under. Man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was also one of the few ways that we actually got to communicate. So as I merged into my teenage years, I started to look more like a hippie, and it drove him crazy.
Right.
And yet I could still shoot duck and fish streams in class with him.
Yeah.
And he was impressed by that.
Yeah, that's very cool.
He tolerated me.
He put up with you, but he took you along, though. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. When did you pick up your first camera?
My dad, half of my dad's business was based in Honolulu because he helped rebuild the fleet after he was in industrial auto parts manufacturing.
Okay.
And he distributed for all of the Eastern manufacturers. He distributed their parts on the West Coast. And so when the Pearl Harbor occurred and the Navy got bombed out and they had to rebuild the fleet, my father opened an office in Honolulu.
Wow. And
helped the Navy rebuild their fleet. And so he was in Honolulu, I don't know, 6 months a year. Yeah, doing all of that. Mm-hmm. And when I was 5, I think, he flew, maybe 7. He flew my mom and I over and said, "Why don't you spend the summer with me?"
Nice.
Yeah. And they didn't know what to do with me. And so they bought me a brownie box camera.
Wow.
And let me wander around in the Kahala Hotel garden and take pictures of random leaves. I had no idea what I was doing.
That's awesome.
They were just entertaining me, and I was good with that.
Uh-huh.
And then I didn't touch really seriously a camera again until I got into college.
Interesting. So what was the inspiration for studying photography at UCLA? You went to school at UCLA, right?
Yeah. And I had to take these art credits And I came out of a very straight and academic boys' school in Pomona called Webb. And we never had any exposure to an art class at all. And I was totally intimidated that to fulfill my UCLA breadth requirements, I would have to do 20 units of art.
Oh, wow.
And the catalog, and I'd look. And
what the hell am I going to do?
yeah, exactly. And the two that opened my eyes, one was called color theory, and the other one was photography. And it was under the auspices of the art department, as opposed to being like a technical school. And I thought, when I was a kid, I used to love to take pictures. So maybe I should just do this. And so I signed up and I was accepted. And the next 3 years changed my life.
Yeah, I'll bet. You went on to do some amazing things. What did you shoot around school in Pomona? Pretty agricultural back then, right?
Yeah. And it wasn't, at that point, I was at UCLA. So I was no longer in Pomona.
Okay, I see. Got you.
Yeah, and I was no longer in Pomona. And I came into UCLA in 1966, which was the beginning of the rock revolution on the Sunset Strip.
Yeah.
And so I found out you could claim you were from the Daily Bruin and get into any rock club on the Strip for free because they wanted you to take pictures that would bring all the UCLA students down to the Strip to fill up the rock clubs. And at first that was a myth. And then I actually got hired by the Daily Bruin to do that.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
So I photographed Cream and Hendrix and the Doors' first performance at the club north of the Whiskey that wasn't the club. And then I was also there the night they finally got invited to the Whiskey.
Wow.
And got their Elektra contract. And I wasn't a commercial photographer in the sense that I was like trying to do album covers or anything like that. I was like photographing them kissing their girlfriends and then making cheap prints in the darkroom at UCLA of Jim kissing some girl and then giving him the photographs.
Lifestyle.
I wasn't
kind
even
of
trying
stuff.
to get paid.
Right.
I just wanted to hang out in those entourages.
Man, what a great way to learn photography. Holy cow.
I don't know. I was really learning photography. It was pretty primitive shooting without a flash and with a lot of,
true. Yeah, true.
pushed film. I was shooting Tri-X at like 3,800 AS.
You learned that by default, you just learned what worked, what didn't work, and you went back. So how did you get driven to conservation? You've done some amazing conservation work, which we'll get into, but what inspired that?
As it would seem obvious, I went to Monterey Pop and spent 3 days in a complete daze. And coming back home, I was driving down the Big Sur coast with a friend that had gone with me, and we were burned out. We were truly burned out. And we were told in Monterey that there was a place that Elizabeth Taylor's son owned and that we could crash and camp out on the Big Sur coast.
Wow.
And as it turned out, that was a place called Limekiln Creek, which is now...
I've been there.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a beautiful state park.
Spot. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. And we pulled in there in the waning twilight and we set up our camp and whatever. And when I woke up in the morning, it was just like being back in Monterey. All these hippies were like beating drums and chanting and they had fires. And I was like so sick of it and I'm also probably still under the influence of being in Monterey for 2 days. Or 3 days. I thought, you know what? This place is supposed to be so great. I want to see this. And so I wandered back on this forest trail in towards the lime kilns. If you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. And it's a beautiful forest.
Yeah, it's
second
amazing.
Second growth redwoods that are now really big.
Yeah.
And beautiful streams and rivulet waterfalls and everything else. And at one point I decided to go off the trail and go down and sit by the stream and try to clear my head because I couldn't hear the campground anymore. I was finally in quietude.
Got away from everything.
Yeah. And somewhere in my teachers at UCLA were very alternative. Okay. And they were like pushing us to do very experimental things. And then one of my father's friends gave me Elliot Porter's book. The first one was In Wildness is the Preservation of the World.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd never seen any color like that ever in photography.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second book they gave me was Glen Canyon, The Place No One Knew.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the most abstract, amazing color I'd ever seen in my life in terms of the photographs. And then Porter wrote a political essay to go along with it. And so I'm sitting by the stream and I'm literally having a conversation with whatever you want to call it, my personal God. I'm in a daze and I'm having this conversation. And the question I was asked is, what are you doing? And my response was, I don't really know. And what am I supposed to do?
Mm-hmm.
And the comeback was, what do you want to do?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, if I could be Elliot Porter, but be out in front of these incidents rather than after the fact when they've already occurred, I would do that in a heartbeat and give up rock and roll photography in a heartbeat and just get out of town.
That's pretty prescient of you. That's interesting how you went to that place.
No kidding. Listen, I'm 74 and I still think about it.
No, that's awesome.
And
but it's interesting.
I answered immediately. I said I would do it in a heartbeat.
Right.
And then listen to this. This is really interesting because the next question was, would you do it if you were never famous?
Really?
Because rock photography is about being famous. And so the question was, would you do it if you were never famous? And I was like, if I succeeded, I would do it. As long as I succeeded.
Success,
and so, now I seem to have, I'm not particularly visible, and I don't know, in some circles I may be famous, but I'm successful.
You got to give yourself a little more credit too.
Level.
You've done some amazing
and
work.
I got exactly what I asked for that day. I got exactly that.
Yeah.
We can believe in whatever gods we want to believe in, but that was, 1967.
That's incredible.
And I was, I don't know, junior in college, and that was the seminal moment in my life.
Yeah. And you carried on to back to that main premise, right? Your entire all your work just goes right back to that. That makes so much sense now of all the work you've done.
By that moment, I never went back.
Yeah.
The one thing is I believed that it happened and I committed.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you created and curated so many great works and projects. Is there one or two that you're the most proud of?
Certainly the first one that started my career, before I was a recognized photographer, I did curatorial work.
Oh, and
I came up with this great idea that the environmental movement and the national parks had been created by photographers. And that then the parks continued to make photographers famous because of the work they did in the parks.
Right.
So it's what's called a symbiotic community.
Right.
And so I proposed that idea as an exhibit and book to the National Park Foundation, which is closely aligned with Washington politics. And they were like, oh, this seems like a good idea. And let's try it. And they didn't know me from Adam, but I knew one of their board members and he stood up for me. And they brought me to DC and they challenged me to prove this idea. And I went into the National Archives and found some very significant, undervalued, not appreciated photographs. And I tied together a short exhibit from William Henry Jackson and Muybridge's Yosemite pictures, William Henry Jackson being Yellowstone, and Muybridge being Yosemite. And then contemporary photographers like myself and Richard Mizrak, who had done work in the various desert parks. And the director of the National Park Foundation was very clever. And he got Secretary Andrus to invite the board to a tea party in the White House in the spring. And then he put my small exhibit of these photographs up in the foyer of the White House.
Wow.
And it was the first photo exhibit in the history of the White House. And he was trying to raise money to fund the bigger exhibition. And Transamerica came on board and gave us $500,000.
Wow. Nice work. Holy cow.
And said, do this,
yeah,
but it's our project, and you're now in bed with Transamerica for the run.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, fine.
Yeah, sure. Right. Yeah, right.
So we did an amazing Viking book, and we had a 12 major museum national traveling show with 250 photographers or 250 prints and like 45 photographers.
Wow.
And it was one of the most heralded. Time Life Book Awards called it the most important photography exhibition of the year.
Wow. Good for you. Congratulations. That's huge.
Yeah, no. And I was, I don't know, 26 or 27.
I was gonna say, right.
So I'm like a really young photographer with no academic institution behind me.
Yeah.
And I create this thing completely out of thin air and blow everybody away. And the show was at the LA County Museum of Art. It was at the Corcoran.
Yeah.
It was, and it was absolutely astounding. It opened at Oakland. We were everywhere with this thing. Minneapolis Institute of the Arts.
And you were on the road for all those, right?
And I was on the road for all of those, lecturing and doing that. And so that made my career. But
man, that put you on the map, that's for sure. Yeah.
Curatorially, not as a photographer.
Gotcha. Yeah. And so the second one in our notes, you mentioned the No Pebble Mine campaign. What did that do for you? How did that come about?
The No Pebble Mine comes almost at the end of my career.
Mm-hmm.
And so I
much later, right?
myself. Yeah, no. So I distinguished myself with the Hudson River campaign and the Tongass campaign and creating the Cuyahoga Valley Park, National Park. And I went through decades of being incredibly lucky to get turned on to projects that I could make a difference in.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was finally elected because probably of my work in the Tongass rainforest. I was elected to the board of the Alaska Conservation Foundation.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
And when I was on that board and towards the end of my term, the exiting president said to me, do you know anything about Southwest Alaska? And I was like, blank. Alaska is a huge
gigantic
state.
I've been there a few times.
And so I only was barely aware of where Southwest was. And I said, no, why? And he said, my friend and I are going out there to fish. It's one of the greatest recreational fishing areas in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also the greatest salmon fishery commercially in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be attacked industrially for sure. Why don't you come out there and do some new work there? And I was like, okay, fine. and this is like the gift of the gods.
No kidding.
My whole career.
Yeah.
Which my whole career has been. I very seldom ever picked a project. The projects picked me.
That's very good. Have you said no to any projects?
No.
I was going to say, yeah,
no, not
wouldn't
ever.
Turn any of those down, right? Yeah, that's amazing.
Always say yes when you are offered amazing opportunities.
Right.
So I said yes, and we flew out there, and we flew out on a stormy day, and we came in under the cloud cover, and having no idea what the landscape would look like, finally, under the cloud cover from the plane, I could see it. And the friend who invited me, the former director of the Alaska Conservation Foundation, said, what do you think? And I said, oh my God, how could you even begin to photograph this? And he said, if anybody can do it, you do it, dig in.
Yeah. How many, you must have been up there more than once to do that shoot.
I spent 4 years there running 6 months from early spring to late fall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a short window.
I shot over 2,000 images.
Wow, beautiful. That's beautiful. Good. I'm appreciative of what you've done and admiring of what you've done just because it's made such an impact on trying to save all these things. The Pebble Mine, geez, we're still fighting that today. Holy cow, how long is it going to take? So my next question is along the lines of what Martin Litton said after they went through the whole Glen Canyon Dam thing, never compromise, and we still are running into these compromises and we make these things. In the end, though, we always seem to compromise too much. With all your efforts and great work opposing all this development, do you have any advice for folks wanting to get involved, and how can we turn this tide? I've been, like you, I've been a conservation and environmentalist my whole life. It's frustrating.
I think we have to be very wary of the idea of compromising, which is what Elliot Porter's book on the Glen Canyon pointed out, the compromise was the Grand Canyon gets saved, but Glen Canyon gets drowned.
Right.
And Porter was, when I met with Elliot in his house in Suzuki, and I asked him about it, and I said, your book has inspired me, and do you have any laments about this? And he said, yeah, that I couldn't do it before the project got started, and that everything I did was after the fact. And that inspired me to be in front of issues like the Tongass rainforest and the Pebble Mine, so that they never even got traction.
Yeah.
And that we shut them out before they got there. And I would like to say that I helped found an organization called the International League of Conservation Photographers, ILCP. And the whole mission of the group is to behave like that and to be totally informed news-wise, and to be out in front of threatening conservation issues.
I love it.
And to cut them off at the knees before they can gain enough momentum to become reality.
Right.
And we've got photographers in Brazil, in the rainforest, in the Philippines, in the deep water reef places, in the tiger reserves of India. We have over 140 members in 70 countries worldwide that are much younger than I am, and that are now ruthless photographers who have been inspired by myself and a few others to get aggressive and stop the destruction of wild habitat before it gets, any further than it's already gone.
Yeah, no, that's great. We'll definitely link to that group in the show notes. It's because we're just overrunning the planet as we continue to make more humans. We can't make more planet, so we got to shift the tide somehow.
Yeah, and I'm happy that we finally have an administration that seems to be willing to help us do that too.
Yeah, I am too, but I don't want to get too much into the weeds there. But we keep shifting gears every 4 to 8 years, and just flip flops. Yeah,
we have to. I personally think we have to recognize habitat destruction and climate change.
Yep.
And if we don't, we're just not even going to be here anymore.
We're toast.
Yeah, we're toast.
Yeah, we're toast. So exactly. And
that
I think
part we can agree on.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah, the toast is being put into the toaster as we speak. So let's shift gears to your photography. Is there a photo project or projects you feel that set you on your path? And obviously, that work you got to do early in your career put you on the map. That was an amazing project.
The very first one was still behaving like an art student. I did a series of landscapes that were mostly forest abstracts. And I printed them at an extremely large size, which wasn't popular in the gallery market yet.
Okay. And
they were incredibly well received. And I got a telephone call from the general counsel of the Lila Atchison Wallace Fund, which is one of the biggest funds in New York. It's Reader Digest money. She built the Egyptian wing of the Metropolitan Museum.
Wow.
And they were helping the state of New York restore the Hudson Valley and all of its historic sites, because they wanted to bring fall tourism into the state, because they felt that the New England states were kidnapping it from them because the Hudson River was viewed as polluted. And they wanted to change that narrative and bring people into the Hudson River Valley.
Okay.
And they offered myself and two other very prominent photographers, Stephen Shore and William Clift, 2-year residencies, if we wanted them, to photograph the valley in any way we chose. And then they would use these images in some way.
Cool.
And Stephen Shore is very academic, and I thought his work in urban Manhattan was brilliant, but I didn't think he knew the first fucking thing about the wilderness.
He might know.
And Bill Clift was a guy like Ansel, and a brilliant black and white photographer from New Mexico. But I didn't think he knew anything about the Hudson Valley either. And so I was the only one working in color. And I thought, if you're going to, or at least compete, why don't you just move into the Hudson Valley for the commission? And so I took up a house, and my to-be wife and I moved into that house and lived in the Hudson Valley for 2 years.
Wow, cool.
And I went out literally every day and shot. And at first that was the scenic Hudson.
Mm-hmm.
And then I began to realize, as I learned more about the river valley, all of the industrial things connected to it, and the logging and the toxic plants in Albany, et cetera, et cetera. And I started photographing those things also.
Wow.
And I brought them to the Lila Wallace Fund and said, I don't expect you guys to publish this, but I want you to know I'm shooting it because you told me to shoot everything. And the general counsel said to me, you're the only one of the 3 photographers that totally gets what we're trying to do. And these pictures are genius.
Yeah.
And we want to pull you out of the project as a group and give you your own book.
Jeez,
and
nice.
Put these pictures in the book. And I was like, nobody's going to put up pictures of the Indian Point atomic power plant and the industrial rail yard at Beacon. And the Lila Wallace Fund said, oh, yeah, they are. And we're paying for the book. Believe me, they're going to do it.
They're going it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And they took me to the most prestigious art publishing group in North America, Aperture Foundation, and rammed me down their throats. And the CEO said, cut it. Why do you want to do this? It's such a beautiful picture book, and we'll sell so many of them if you just leave these industrial pictures out. And the council said, we'll publish with somebody else if you don't put them in. And so they put them in, and they published the book in late November. They did 10,000 copies, and we sold all of them before Christmas.
Wow. Amazing.
It was one of the hottest books they ever had.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that transformed everything for me. And then Aperture saw me as a savant about environmental messaging. So when I got the commission to photograph the Tongass rainforest, and I came back to them with, these beautiful rainforest pictures and all these clear-cut pictures, they were like, okay, we get this.
They got it, yeah.
And we'll put the clear-cut pictures in the book also.
Yeah, that makes sense,
And we sold 3 editions of that and 68,000 copies.
Yeah.
So that's no small sales in picture book terms.
No, and that's brilliant on your part to figure that out. Did you get some inspiration from the Porter book and the words?
Oh, yes,
yeah,
of course.
He gave you. He missed out on all that. He didn't get to do the before and after. Yeah.
Yes. And because I made that internal pledge to my various internal gods, that if you would do this for me, I will always act in this way.
Right.
And the Hudson River Commission was the first proof of it, but the Tongass Commission was the absolute proof of it, because that book, which I handed out in Congress, helped pass the largest timber reform bill in the history of the United States. And I was invited to the White House by George Bush Sr. to acknowledge me for the impact of my book on the Congress.
Yeah. Good on you, man. That's what a great career. You've been to some incredible places also. What was the most challenging to shoot? You've been hot, cold, snow, rain. What was the toughest?
Alaska in general. The Tongass rainforest was a whole new learning of how to manage in such a wet environment. There's places that get 325 inches of rain a year, which means that not only does it likely rain every day, but on some days it may rain 30 inches. And it doesn't matter how good your tent is or your gear protection is or anything. I've got all these larger cameras, 645s and 6x7s.
Wow, yeah.
That I've got to protect from all this stuff,
right,
and still try to get images. And so that was ongoing.
How did you do that?
And then when I moved out to Southwest Alaska and they put me in the air, I shoot with for being mobile, I shoot with a Pentax 645.
Okay.
And I'm an old school big camera guy, and I shoot film. And I had to learn to use the pilot and the plane to position myself, because you can't go back around for the shot. You either have gotten the shot or you have not gotten the shot.
Right.
And the skill of finding the right pilot to fly with, and then knowing where to position the angle of your plane to get your shot, was a big deal. And frankly, I think the work I've done on the Pebble Mine and over Southwest Alaska is in that it's the last field work of my life. It's also the best field work of my life.
Did you fly with the same guy most of the time?
Not
or the same
always,
couple guys?
but I flew with 2 or 3 pilots that were the same guys, and we knew each other. After the first flight, the pilots were so smart.
Yeah.
And they saw what I was doing, and they were on board with why I was doing it, that I learned from the pilots.
Yeah.
I'd have a pilot say to me, "Do you want me to rotate and drift?" And I would like, "Yeah, please."
They know how to fly their plane. You know how to run your camera. I mean, those guys they're amazing up there.
So they would throw stuff out like that to me. Yeah. And once I learned the language, then I was like, "Yes, absolutely, please." Yeah.
How did you protect the cameras from all the rain on the ground? I mean, you must have, I don't know, tarps. What the hell did you do? I've been there. I know what it's like. Well, holy crap.
You're going to find this, you and your listeners are going to find this really funny, because I basically believe in plastic bags. And I would set my 6x7 and my 645 up on tripods.
Yeah.
And I would put them outside the tent and just put a plastic bag over them.
Okay. Yeah.
And let it rain on them.
Yeah.
And then when it was raining, I had my full Patagonia rain suit craziness.
Right.
And then later when it got worse, I moved over to Helly Hansen. And I had lashes on my inside pockets that were tied to handkerchiefs. And I would whip out the handkerchief and put it over the camera while I was taking a picture, so the camera wouldn't get wet.
Gotcha.
And then immediately put the handkerchief back in my pocket and put a plastic bag back over the camera.
Wow, man.
And it's an absolute discipline. But it is so wet and it's so humid and it rains so much.
Yeah.
There's no getting around it.
Yeah.
You're not going to be functional if you can't keep all of that equipment dry.
Yep, that's right. It's amazing. You don't know unless you've been there how much the rain just It's like standing under a bucket for weeks. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's still on your bucket list? Or we have anything next? What's next?
No, the next for me is to kill the Pebble Mine permanently.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I've been working on that campaign for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
And this is the last quest.
The seminal moment. Yep.
Yeah. It's the Bob Marshall moment of trying to protect all of Alaska. Yeah. Only he didn't get to do that. Yeah. But I actually may get to protect a huge portion if we can get this mine canceled.
Yeah.
And the good news is the Army Corps of Engineers just denied their permit. And now Biden's been elected.
Yeah, we're getting close. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think we're very close. And Obama had formerly put Bristol Bay into a decreed protective status, and then Trump took it out. And I think Biden will reinstate that and then get into greater depth over how EPA handles the mine site. And so I'm hopeful about that. And if that happened, that would be the most significant accomplishment in my life.
That'd be huge for you. Yeah.
And then number 2 would be
huge for all of us, actually. But yeah,
Trump also rolled out the overturning of the roadless rule in the Tongass. And I would like to see that turned back. And if that got turned back into roadless rule is roadless rule.
Right. What part of roadless do you not understand?
1 and 2. Yeah. And I would be fucking Golden Boy. Seriously. I'd be the luckiest photographer in American photographic history.
Yeah. Hard work too. You've done some fabulous work to help get the job over to the finish line. Now we got to get it over the finish line. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think in the next 4 years, we may actually get over those finish lines. And then if you're asking me about, I don't go in the field anymore. I'm 74. I've got a really shitty hip and I've got a really impaired hip. And
that's okay. We use those words all the time around here.
And so I don't envision myself being in wilderness any longer, but there are some places I wish I had gone to enjoy that I never got to because they weren't projects.
Gotcha.
And one of them is New Zealand, and one of them is Tahiti.
Okay.
And as I noted to you earlier, I would so gladly go once COVID is no longer an issue.
Right.
I would so gladly go to one of those over-the-water thatch roof huts in Tahiti.
Right.
And just sit around for about 7 days and watch tropical fish and go swimming and maybe even surfing.
Perfect.
I would do that in a heartbeat.
That sounds like a good thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have surfed and boogie boarded all my life. So
cool.
You handed me a break and some people around me to make sure that I'm not so old I die by myself.
Yeah.
I would venture out into, any great wave set.
Okay, cool.
And tear it up.
Mm-hmm.
And
I see that in your future. Sounds like it.
I would love to.
Yeah.
I here in Manhattan Beach, I'm locked down and I'm in kind of isolation.
Right.
And I don't have a lot of friends in the lineup because they're all a lot younger.
Yeah.
And so I hesitate going out by myself. But if I were in an environment where I had people who knew I was out there, I'd go out there in a minute in a boogie board. I've been in 15 feet of surf in Hawaii on a boogie board.
Wow.
And, shredding it. I've grown up with waves all my life. I started surfing when I was in high school, and I moved to the lying down position because it's more exciting to me.
You're closer to the action.
Well, you're closer to the action, and when you get inside a tube, you can get so far back in there that George Greene proved all of this to us. You can, that film was, the innermost limits of absolute fun or whatever. That morning he filmed at Rincon, where he got back 40 feet into a tube or whatever.
Yeah, right.
I never got over that. I was like, oh my God, that's it. And he was riding a kneeboard. He wasn't riding a surfboard. And so for me, I've been at Pipeline on a boogie board. I've been at the Redondo Breakwater on a boogie board. So I completely appreciate that place. And I'm probably not sufficiently physically fit enough to deal with big waves anymore. But God, how about Solana Beach at 4 feet? That would be really great.
Well, and you're comfortable. You have no experience that you can pull it off. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So are you working on anything now? What are you working on now?
In 2006, I had a huge museum show in Fort Worth, Texas at the Amon Carter Museum. That was a 45-year retrospective.
Oh, cool.
And it covered everything and all the projects, environmental, that I had ever done in my photography career.
Wow.
And I came out of that museum for about a month and a half afterwards, like saying to myself, what do you do now? Do you just keep doing the same stuff? And I knew I wasn't as capable of being in the field. But the whole new world of photography had rolled over into the digital domain. And I thought, most of your friends are only learning enough about the digital domain to make their landscape photographs look good.
Yep. And a lot of that's not done in the camera.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so what if you just took all of your images, 1 million plus inventory, and went into the digital domain and just treated it entirely differently.
Wow, yeah.
Nothing you've ever seen before. And that probably harkens back to my original teachers at UCLA that were always teaching alternative process. And so I embraced Adobe, but not to make my landscape photographs look better, but to make them look different.
Right.
And I started to produce, I now have a series that is 24 panels large and 6 feet tall when it's printed out, 6 feet by 28 inches in each panel. And it's called the Evolution series. And it would take up an entire museum gallery.
Yeah, huge. Yeah.
Show. Yeah. And I have other stuff that I am printing on metal. There's an entirely new technological process where you can embed photographic dyes in aluminum by using heat.
Wow.
And they become literally embedded. They're not like printed on the surface.
Right.
They're within the aluminum substrate. And so I have created a series of mandalas based on various amazing places in the world that I've gone.
Cool.
Reflecting their habitat, vegetation, and the biome, the look at the biome, Arctic and tropical forest and fungus and things like that. And when we put these pieces together, we did it by breaking up the image, if you will, fracturing it, and coming up with a whole bunch of pieces. And then
actually breaking it or cutting it? Breaking it.
Just shattering it in Adobe.
Wow. Okay.
And then coming up with various pieces and putting them together. And what we ended up creating had these ragged external shapes.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to my techie guide that I work with, God, this is an amazing shape. It's too bad we can't make a print out of this.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, if we print it on aluminum, we can cut the external shape with a router.
Oh, man.
And you can actually have this shape.
Yeah.
And these are some really wild shapes.
How bad? Yeah.
Complicated shapes.
Yeah.
And we started doing that. And I am now, 5 years into exhibiting these things.
Oh, cool.
And I donate a considerable amount of work to various nonprofits. And one of them here in Los Angeles is called the Venice Family Clinic.
Mm.
And they provide medical services for street people. And I have been in the Venice Family Clinic art auction as an LA artist for 27 years or something.
Mm.
And I put one of these pieces in last year, and the print went for a bigger auction price than John Baldessari, Los Angeles' most prominent artist. So that was like a huge,
that must be fantastic artwork. I got to see that.
So I've started, doing more of these, and I'm going to have another one in the Art Walk auction this year. And the same piece is going to be shown in a major museum show in Sun Valley, Idaho.
Wow.
So
that's fun.
Somehow moved from being a landscape photographer to being a photographer that uses his landscape photographs in different ways.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, good for you. How did you figure that out? I'm not familiar with the breaking photo in Adobe. How does that work? You actually break the image on screen in Adobe, and then you print it out on the aluminum? How's that?
Yeah, you can shatter it like glass.
Wow.
I mean, there's a bunch of things you can do.
Yeah.
That's not the only one.
No, I'm sure if it can do that, I'm sure you can do it.
You can divide it and flip it. You can.
Play with that.
The commands. One of the things when I finally left straight photography, and I embraced the Adobe Darkroom back in 2006 and 2007, I would open up these. I had no idea what I was doing, and so I would go into it and just say, what do all these commands mean?
Right.
And the new one that I just produced for Venice this year, and that will be in the show in Sun Valley, I took 3 photographs. I merged them, which is a feat unto itself, a unique Adobe feat. It's called blending.
Yeah, done that.
You can choose of the in the case of the 3 photographs, you can choose which one you want to be the predominant blend.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And then you can like flip between them to see what you like just by clicking, right?
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
I mean, so you see the differential immediately. Mm-hmm. And then there's a whole nother stream that you get offered that are called pin light, bright light, dawn light.
Yep. Yep. Seen those. Yeah.
It changes the whole color array and the way the colors are seen.
Yeah.
And so when you start working down through these layers, you end up with dozens of options.
Wow.
And then you've got them all on the screen in front of you, and all of a sudden you hit some key and it comes up and you're like, oh my God, it just is what just happened here. And that is I think the art of it is, like all photographers who are challenged, and I taught a lot of workshops, so I heard this all the time. I love to take pictures, but I don't know which ones are my best. And my greatest strength was, if I looked at the work long enough, I could always figure out what my best ones were. And so you just have to look at the work and really get tough on yourself.
Yeah.
And say, what is it that makes this work, that makes it different from everything else? And so now that I'm in this infinite Adobe Darkroom, I have even more choices.
Yeah.
But in fact, curatorially, like when I did the American Photographer and the National Park Show, I had thousands of photos submitted by hundreds of photographers that wanted to be in that show. And John Bryant, the director of the National Park Foundation, said to me, I don't know how you do this. And I said, actually, it's easy, because the more pictures I see, the more I realize where the great ones are and how banal all the others are. And the abundance actually isolates the brilliance.
Yeah, that's a good way to explain it too, because if you see the masses of anything, the more of that you see, that makes total sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can't explain it, but yeah.
Yeah, and when I see all these
the sharpness
Adobe
and the colors and
on the screen in front of me, I can go to one immediately and go, "Oh my God, this was out there."
Yeah, it just stands out.
And choose that. Yeah. Yes,
makes total sense. Yeah, well, that sounds like a fun project, man. You spend a lot of time in the darkroom. That's pretty cool.
Hey, I'm 74 and I'm in COVID lockdown. I got nothing better to do.
Yeah. We're going to take a little break and give some love to our sponsor. I've heard from some of you photographers out there that you've always wanted to sell your photos online. SmugMug makes it easy. With a few clicks, you can start selling prints and digital downloads right away. They handle everything from billing to shipping and work with some of the best labs in the world. Rick Say's Photography has been with SmugMug for over 20 years, and they've handled every transaction flawlessly. Go to theoutdoorbizpodcast.com/sellphotos and try it for free. To set up your account today, go to theoutdoorbizpodcast.com/sellphotos. And now, back to the show. So how has COVID impacted your business? Let's talk about that a little bit, other than we can't go anywhere. So,
well, it's impacted me because my socializing was to go out to have dinner in town. I live in Manhattan Beach has an amazing downtown with fantastic restaurants. Yeah. And there was nothing better to do than go out and go downtown and have a great dinner and get bombed.
Yep.
And so I don't get to do that, but I've always been isolated, whether I was camping in Alaska or whether I was in a dark room printing up an exhibit. And so that's not new to me.
Yeah.
And I get being alone. And I work out of my home. And so my digital studio, I have a formal exhibit studio up near the LA airport.
Okay.
But I have a digital studio in one of my bedrooms upstairs.
Oh, cool.
And I just go up there and work every day.
That's great.
And I think I sent you my blog link.
Yeah.
And I write 2 blogs every day covering my autobiography.
Yeah,
and
you're still pretty busy.
A lot of work too.
Yeah, you're still.
You've got to have the text for that, and you've got to have the Adobe prepared pictures, and I've got to feed all that stuff to my social media coordinator, and so I've got 3 hours of work in the morning to feed her.
Yeah,
and then I take the afternoon and I spend it in my new digital darkroom.
Right.
Exploring image making.
That's very cool. You're still pretty busy too. You're pretty prolific. That's admirable. Good for you, man.
It's either that or just get stupid and drunk and don't do anything. And that's never really been an option. I don't mind the drunk part, but it's never been an option to be stupid.
But you've always been creative, so that comes through. Yeah.
Yeah, and people ask me, like my doctors and everybody else ask me, "Are you retired?" And I'm like, I don't know what you don't know about this. But artists don't retire.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
They just paint until they die or sculpt until they die. That's just what they do.
Yeah, that's what we do.
And because I'm a photographer or whatever, a digital whatever, this is just what I do in my daily existence. And I'm not going to stop doing it.
Yeah, don't stop. Yeah, don't stop. We don't want you to stop until you create great stuff. So don't stop.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Do you have any... So after all these years of taking photos and stuff, you taught some workshops and things. Do you have any suggestions or advice for folks that want to get into photography?
I actually lost some of the top photography workshops that I used to teach because my school of thought started being criticized by their students. And what their students wanted me to teach them how to use all the new cameras. All the new Nikon 520D is out.
Yeah, what's this button do? Yeah.
Aren't you going to lecture about this?
Yeah.
And my lecture was how to see through the viewfinder. And to me, it doesn't matter what camera you're working with. You could have a brownie box camera. But if you don't understand what's in the viewfinder, you don't have a picture. And it doesn't matter how good the fucking camera is.
That's right.
And actually stopped teaching workshops because I was getting more and more criticism from workshop students saying, we're not learning anything from him. And
that's sad in many ways. Yeah, that's too
my
bad.
Process still has to do with, if you can't see through the viewfinder, then it doesn't matter what camera you're using.
Yep.
You're not going to see anything. And so that is still my mantra.
Mm-hmm.
And I just got tired of trying to defend it.
Yeah.
But that is the if you're asking me that question, the bottom line is the process of photography is about seeing.
Yeah.
And it's about seeing through a very particular frame of reference, which is the viewfinder. Mm-hmm. And you get to include or exclude anything you want.
Yeah.
You can put on a bigger lens. You can put on a wider lens. Mm-hmm. You can do whatever you want. But it ends up being about what it's not about those lenses or that camera. And if you don't get that, then, and you just think it's about buying the next generation Nikon, you're missing the whole point.
Yeah, you're taking snapshots. Anybody can do that. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. That's well put. Yeah, it's interesting too. I think like you're experiencing with your digital darkroom and Adobe, it's in addition to what through the viewfinder that makes you want to take the photo. There's also all kinds of creativity now that you can go back in the digital darkroom and see that one image and turn it into 5, 10, who knows how many different pieces of art. So that's
oh my God, yes.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
That is just a digital file that then opens up a whole other world.
Right. You know? Yeah, it's amazing too. Yeah.
I took a nice picture of the clouds tonight. Watch this.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's exciting. I'm sure you've been to a number of trade shows. We don't go to trade shows much these days, but if you were able to hang a huge banner at the front of one of them, what would it say?
Get outside and have fun.
Love it.
I am so lucky that photography brought me out of the clubs on the Sunset Strip and launched me into the wilderness of backcountry Idaho. Mm-hmm. It saved my life. It literally saved my life. Mm-hmm. And my father thought I was crazy when I told him what I wanted to do because he wanted me to become a businessman and have a salary job and all that stuff. And I was like, you know what? You brought me up out here, and now you're raining on my parade. And I'm not coming into your suit and tie environment. I'm going to wear Patagonia gear and go to Alaska. See ya.
Yeah. I can relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think we are an ever increasing urban group that barely even camps anymore. And that the most important thing we could do is just get out of that urban environment and get outside. Yeah,
no, I agree. I support that 100%.
I made a point. My children have been in and out of Camp Denali 3 times. They've been to the Tongass 5 times, and they both went to school in Boston at Northeastern, and they like going to country houses for their weekends.
That's great. Yeah.
But I haven't seen any of them do a camping trip yet. It is, even with my indoctrination, it hasn't been enough. And I worry that as we become ever more urbanized, that we get more distant from the actual natural world. And if that's true, we're up the creek, you know?
Yeah. And it's interesting because we see that here in Bishop where they come out to the wilderness or to the campgrounds, but they bring the urban world with them. They're all they just change the streets of LA for the streets of the campground, and they get out on some trails and stuff, but not, I think, and a lot of people get out into the wilderness. I shouldn't sell it short, but you're right. I think you got to spend some time, as Doug Robinson said, a day on the ground under the stars is one of the best days, or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm butchering that phrase. No.
And I'm a big fan of really extreme location, and they have been like the Arctic. They've been sobering moments for me.
Same.
And I'm so grateful that I got to do projects that took me to these extremely wild places, and that I have come, face to face multiple times with grizzly bears, and that I have flown in a helicopter over the vast, barren Arctic landscape, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And you can do that. You can actually do that as a life thing, as a job.
Yeah.
And so the idea that you have to wear a suit and tie and report to a corporate officer at some tower in New York is just drives me nuts. And so I, as I said, the banner would be
Yeah. No, I'm with you. We're kindred
Get
spirits.
out of town as soon as you can.
I'm totally with you. Yep. We're kindred spirits in that way. Yep. Do you have any daily routines you use to keep your sanity, exercise, meditate?
Right now, it's obviously a very weird moment in our lives.
Yeah.
And I had serious pneumonia 10 years ago.
Mm.
And so I'm especially cautious.
Mm-hmm.
So I locked down, but that didn't change much of my digital darkroom discipline.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's all the same. And then I do go out and I walk, and I'm about to buy myself an e-bike.
Oh, cool. Good for you.
I have been bicycling for a long time, and I had a Strand Cruiser. I live in Manhattan Beach, and we've got a 26-mile bike
Great
path here.
spot.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, but my hip doesn't allow me to take this cruiser up the hill anymore.
Oh, right.
And so the e-bike is going to make up that difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to get back into biking, but with an assist.
Yeah. That's smart. No, good for you. At least you're getting out there. Yeah.
I'm waiting. It's supposed to be here within 3 weeks. So
awesome. Good
I'll
for
believe
you.
it when I see it.
It'll be there. Yeah, good for you. That's cool. Do you have any favorite books or books you give as gifts? Some of your books, I'm sure you do. They're beautiful.
Certainly, I like to give my book regarding the land, Robert Ketchum and the Legacy of Elliot Porter, because it's very flattering and it's a 45-year compilation of my best work. But outside of my own self-interest, I think Barry Lopez was one of the greatest American naturalist writers in our history. And in particular, Arctic was
It's a great book.
Just an eye-opening book.
Yeah.
And after I read it, I wrote Barry and said, how do you access these places that you got to go and stay and write? And he said, it's really hard to do, but I'll put in some good words for you, and maybe you'll get to go to some of those places. And then, as if the gods wanted it, Bill Simon, the former Secretary of the Treasury, called me up and said, you want to join my expedition across the Northwest Passage?
Oh man, cool.
And I didn't need Barry's turn-ons anymore because I had the Secretary of the Treasury. But Barry's book, The Arctic, just blew my mind because it opened up, and it's long, but it's not boring.
Right.
It's totally readable. And he talks about things like tracking a polar bear across the ice and the way that mirages and the clarity of the air create weird hallucinations. And it's an amazing story of a place that most of us don't know anything about.
Yeah.
And after I read it, I had already come to love him because of other books he'd done. And so when, Arctic came out, I was like, okay, it's called Arctic Dreams.
Arctic Dreams, yeah.
Actually.
Yeah.
And so when I read it, I had no expectations. I was thinking, you know what, really? After all the wolves things,
right.
The other stuff you've done, why would you do this book on the Arctic? What's going on in the Arctic? There's nothing there. And then I came out of the book thinking, oh my God, how misinterpretive could I have been about any place like this?
He painted a great picture. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. And so when either I give a present or people ask me about books I've read, I'm like, try this one.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Do you have a favorite piece of outdoor gear under $100 purchase? Sorry,
Patagonia zipper turtleneck.
Oh, there you go. Yep, that's a good one. Yeah.
There's between the Tongass rainforest and the freezing cold conditions of the Arctic and all the other places I've ever been, a mid-layer Capilene zipper T-neck it's under $100 and it's just a quintessential piece of equipment.
It's one of those things you can wear in all conditions. You're right. Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah.
And if it gets hot, you can just drop the thing and have a big open throat. And if a shitty wind comes up and you're being stormed while you're kayaking, you don't have to bail all of a sudden. You just zip the T-neck up and keep going. So it's one of the most useful pieces of equipment I've ever owned. And I'm a big fan of Patagonia in general. Yvonne when I started skiing in the backcountry, we were all wearing wool knickers and wool socks and plastic shells. And nobody had ever seen Capilene or fleece. And the the Patagonia products broke on the market when I started my rainforest project.
Oh, cool. Perfect timing.
And I wrote them immediately, and they sent me just a ton of gear without asking any questions.
Yeah.
They were so generous. They didn't know me from Adam.
Yeah.
And they sent me this ton of gear. They sent us rain shells, and they sent us fleece, and they sent us long johns, and the whole thing. And not all of it was perfect yet, but over the years it got perfect. Yeah, and Yvon and his crew strive to produce the best, and now also the most eco-conscious.
Yep. They're doing great work all the way around. Yep. Full circle.
That's as much as you could ask for in a corporation.
That's right. Yep. They're nailing it. Yeah, that's right. As we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to say to our audience or ask of our audience?
Just get out of your urban lifestyles and get out there. Get outside.
I love it. I love it.
More and more of us are getting sucked into being urban, so don't.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Take yourselves out to Valley of Fire Campground in Nevada, Capitol Reef in Utah, or something. I don't know, anywhere.
Go for a walk on the beach. I mean, do something.
Yeah, just have a great outdoors and turn off your freaking internet and your computer and get a life.
Yeah, I love it. Where can people find you? You're all over Twitter, Instagram. We'll link to all those things. Is there anywhere? Email? Can they reach you by email somewhere? Or
yeah, I gave you that. My email is in that list.
Yeah.
But one of the fun things that they may all enjoy is my blog site, because it's an autobiography of my life. And I actually did curatorial work on recreating dead photographers and doing their biographies. And I realized that even though I did a lot of deep research, that I would never know exactly what their life was like. And when I began to blog, I was doing it for the Pebble Mine campaign. And my social media manager said to me, "You've had all these amazing campaigns, Tongass Rainforest, Sonora Desert, Cuyahoga Valley. Why don't you create a blog around each of them and give them the background story?"
Oh, cool.
And all of the pictures that didn't get published and all of the things behind the scene that went on.
Right.
And I was like, I don't want to do that. And then I did. And then I realized that rather than have someone else tell my story after I'm gone and not know any of it, by being completely blunt and upfront, I could cover all of my projects on a blog post. And I do 2 every day of the working week. So that's 10 a week on my homepage, and have my own personal bad behaviors when I'm out there in the wilderness.
I think we all have those.
Yeah, and I won't go on about that here. When you're reading my blog, you're pretty clear that I'm honest about that. And if I say I'm sitting around the campground tonight and it's raining cats and dogs, but we're all having snacks, you can imagine what I'm implying is a way to express the reality of the project, as opposed to the whatever 60 pictures you got to see in my Aperture book.
Yeah. No, that's great.
And for instance, with the Pebble Mine campaign, the 2 books I did on the area where the Pebble is being built contained 120 pictures, and my blog on the Pebble Mine today posted at 440.
Wow. Yeah.
And I'm not going to tell you that they're all perfect pictures.
No, that's the beauty of it, though.
But I am going to tell you that they spin a story that makes the Pebble campaign much more real.
Right.
And it gives you all of the background.
Well, the backstory is almost as important as the story sometimes. So,
yeah. And a book by a big publishing company doesn't give you any of that, because it's just the best pictures and the fluff text, and maybe Robert Redford writes your preface or something. But it doesn't tell you anything about what really went on. Like Ted Turner's son and I did the night we arrived in Southwest Alaska to begin the Bristol Bay campaign, Ted Turner's son, Rhett, and I were supposed to hook up with a native woman that was going to connect us with everybody that would help us. And then it turned out that she was supposed to be at a wedding party for the daughter of the Greek Orthodox church minister. And all of the native women who went to that church, she was white, but all the attendees were Yupik. and they were throwing a bachelorette party for her, and they were supposed to be male lap dancers, and they didn't show up. And she pleaded with us to lap dance for her in the absence of the other lap dancers. And thanks to some bad behavior on her part, we agreed. And Ted Turner's son, and I lap danced a Christian Orthodox wife in front of about 60 Native women in a Native house in Dillingham, Alaska. And I have to say, Rhett got $78 and I got $31. Nice. So clearly being older, I was not as appreciated.
Yeah, that's awesome.
How silly is that?
Yeah.
But
folks, that's just one story of two a day. So now you get the sense of how awesome that blog is.
And yes, and here's the beauty of that. The next morning, we're supposed to go meet the chairman of the local Native corporation, who is supposed to be like turning us on to pilots and things like that. And we come into his office, and he's only 28 years old. And I'm like, wow, are you the chief of this? And he said, yeah. And I said, and how's that? And he said, I have a Harvard degree and blah, blah, blah. And I said, God, I'm so excited to work with you. And he said, I'm glad. And you've already made a really great first impression. And I said, how's that? And he said, my wife was at the party last night. He said, so the village loves you and you're okay. How can I help you?
You're in.
You're in.
Oh, that's my God. That's awesome. That's great. Well, I look forward to reading more of those. That's awesome. Robert, it's been great chatting with you. I appreciate the time. I look forward to face-to-face one of these days. I'll come down to Manhattan Beach and we'll go for a walk.
Oh, please. And hopefully we can get over the restaurant thing and we could go eat at one of these great restaurants down here.
Yep. It'll happen. Yep. The vaccine's going to unlock things a bit for us, so it'll be good. Yeah. Well, I appreciate the time.
Thank you. And thank you for even being interested. And I hope your audience has enjoyed themselves.
I think it's going to be awesome. Yep. Thank you.
It's been fun talking with you.
Cool. Well, we'll be in touch.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Outdoor Biz Podcast. Be sure to visit our website, theoutdoorbizpodcast.com, where you'll find show notes with links to everything we talked about and more. Subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll never miss an episode. And while you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or spread the word and tell a friend about the show. That would really help us out too. Be sure to tune in every week. And thanks again for listening to the Outdoor Biz Podcast with Rick Saez.